The honourable member for Hamilton Centre.
Thank you very much, Speaker. I appreciate the opportunity to join in the debate. Coming from Hamilton, where we're dealing with a very different reality than the citizens of Saskatchewan in terms of the Potash Corporation, because we were in the overwhelming majority of companies, that category where there was just a rubber stamp and it was allowed to go on. Right now, as we sit and speak here today, when we look at what this legislation ultimately is supposed to be about, a net benefit to Canada. Last time I checked the map, Hamilton was a part of Canada, and therefore there ought to be a net benefit, certainly in the hometown of where the plant is. As of today, we're on the brink of this company locking out its employees, the ones that are left, after they shut down production and laid off a whole whack of other workers. And if they get what they want in their negotiation demands, the steelworkers who are currently retired will lose their inflation protection going forward. That may not seem like an awful lot when we're talking 1-2% inflation, but a lot of us believe with everything that's gone on in the last few years, there's likely somewhere in the lifetime of those steelworkers going to be a period of inflation. And at the end of that, their income is going to be a lot less, and their quality of life is going to be a lot less, and their net benefit to being a Canadian is less than it was. And not only that, they want to change the collective agreement further so that every employee hired from here on in doesn't get the same pension benefit as the workers that came even the day before them. In fact, they won't have a pension. They'll be caught into this nightmare scenario that I think is coming for a lot of people who are invested totally with RRSPs, which is not nearly the same as negotiating a defined benefit, so you know how much money you're going to get every month when you're retired, as opposed to down on bended knee praying to the free market gods that they're lucky enough when they cash out that the market's on an upswing. That's what this government has done to my constituents, my family members, my friends, and my fellow Canadians. Where's the net benefit? Now, lest you think this is only the NDP doing their, stuff that they do, let's have a look at what the Hamilton Spectator had to say just a few weeks ago. Quote, "It's instructive to cut through the rhetoric surrounding the shutdown underway at the U.S. Steel Hamilton plant." I'm reading excerpts from this. It's October 6, 2010. "Essentially, it has become clear that the U.S. Steel's Hamilton plant is not considered a primary site for production. A primary site does not shut down regularly and have its production shifted to plants in the United States. Call the Hamilton plant a backup location, an overflow operation, whatever. The plant in our city is nowhere near the top of the steel giant's list of important places. But Canadian government approval of the purchase was contingent on commitments from U.S. Steel on maintaining certain employment and production levels." They end with this: U.S. Steel owes it to its employment, U.S. Steel owes it to us, meaning Hamiltonians, to fulfill its employment and production commitments. If not, it should be seeking Canadian-based buyers for a plant that still has productive life in it. Quite frankly, anything other than just washing their hands of it, which is what this government is doing. And make no mistake, the minister, I believe yesterday in response to a question from my colleague on Hamilton Mountain, said this: "We are the first government in the history of the Investment Canada Act to actually take a company to court to enforce the undertakings that it promised with the government and the people of Canada," end quote. Well, it's interesting. I'll go back to the Hamilton Spectator, so that makes it just a little more difficult for the government to say this is just partisan NDP politics, because it's not. This is about people's lives. And what did the Spectator say in part on May the 8th in 2009 about that? Listen to this, quote, "As for the threat," which ultimately they did, that's what he was referring to, "as for the threat of 10,000 a day fines, that's $3.65 million a year. Chump change to U.S. Steel. By comparison, a Dundas optician has been subject to fines of $50,000 a day since November 06 for operating in violation of Ontario health regulations. If Ottawa is serious about enforcing its foreign investment legislation, it needs to up the penalties considerably. Ottawa should also change the Investment Canada Act so that future agreements and commitments would be public, with the reasonable exception of sanctions that could put a company at competitive disadvantage. U.S. Steel has an obligation to honor its agreements or explain how and when it intends to do so. Ottawa has a duty to push for answers." Where was the government? The minister was in Hamilton on October the 15th. Here's what he said. Quote, "At this point, obviously, U.S. Steel is beyond the undertakings that it made with the Canadian government, with the government of Canada," he said. "Those undertakings ended some time ago now. They were for a period of time that has now expired, so they can make decisions, good or bad or indifferent, according to their own timetable and their own responsibilities." Well, Rolf Gerstenberger, who's the president of USW Local 1005, had something to say about that. And I'm quoting from a document they circulated in the Local. "Visiting Hamilton for a funding announcement at McMaster University, October 15, 2010, industry minister," I can't say the name, "made a factually wrong, socially irresponsible, politically stupid statement. Asked about the activities of U.S. Steel, about which all of Hamilton is understandably very concerned, the minister said," and it's what I quoted, "Mr. Clement should know that the 3-year commitment to U.S. Steel made to the government of Canada is not beyond the undertakings it made to the government of Canada. He should know that those undertakings did not end some time ago, but in fact expire on October 31st, 2010. Mr. Clement should know that U.S. Steel has yet to recognize its commitments to keep employment at 3,105 workers and production of 4.3 million tons of steel a year, and that furthermore, it has shut down the blast furnace at Hamilton Works for a second time and is thereby producing no steel at all," and they go on. My contention is there's the evidence that this government has washed its hands of those steel workers at U.S. Steel and of aluminum workers and workers all across Canada, and the only reason the potash deal was stopped was because there was such an uproar across the province of Saskatchewan that they had no choice. Well, I want to say, Speaker, had they been putting the interest of steel workers first, and had they been putting the interest of the Canadian steel industry first, and had they been putting the interest and net benefit of Canadians first, they would have also turned down the U.S. Steel deal, because it's just as bad for the workers. And all we're trying to do with this legislation, it's really not that radical, is to throw some light on the situation, say that these deals happening in the background can't go on. We're saying a number of things, but these are the main ones. That there ought to be some public acknowledgement, some public involvement. There ought to be maybe some public negotiations. But you can't, the government cannot just wash its hands based on the holy grail of the market, which they've now shown to be a rather elusive goal. And I see the Speaker telling me I'm down to 1 minute. I hope, Speaker, at the end of the day, that when all the yelling, mine and everyone else's, on behalf of people who are being hurt, who are not getting any net benefit, we'll finally have a parliament that's prepared to come head-to-head and properly put rules and protection in place for workers and the communities that they live in. Because without that, Speaker, we will be back here over and over and over trying to defend job by job. It would just be so much easier if we had a government that believed the interests of those working people and the net benefit of Canadians really was the top priority rather than the almighty buck, which always comes first with this government. Thanks, Speaker.
Questions and comments. Questions et commentaires. The honourable member for Windsor West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I congratulate my colleague on a very good speech detailing the issues around U.S. Steel and the effects on workers. And one of the more interesting things that we've had take place during this debate, and I agree with his assessment, if it wasn't for the good people of Saskatchewan and Canadians from across this country pushing the potash issue, there's no way that this government would have turned away from this actual deal. And this is one of the reasons I think the minister is now using the language of interim decision. But one of the things he's done is he's pointed out quite correctly that the Liberals never had a case turned down on their watch. They turned down McDonald Detweiler, thanks to the good work of Peggy Nash. And one of the other interesting things is that the minister has been bragging that he's taking U.S. Steel to court, which, when you back this up, it's rather odd. Here you have U.S. Steel come in, the minister sits down with U.S. Steel, decides that this is going to be a good business partner, sets out the terms and conditions for their partner then just basically backhands them at the expense of Canadian families and workers, and he's bragging about how he's bringing them to court. How is it unbelievably ignorant and absolutely arrogant from this minister? How does it help the workers and the people of Hamilton just because they're having to bring their business partner to court? I'd like my colleague to answer that question, because I can't understand. If you don't have a job, you're sitting at home, you've paid into your pension, you've paid to the United Way, and you've done all your good diligence over the years as a good hard worker to be productive, because they use us as a branch plant and they shut down operations to feed their Americans, that just because the government is taking them to court, they should be grateful.
The honourable member for Hamilton Centre.
Thank you, Speaker, and I thank my colleague for his observations. And I think it's interesting that the Hamilton Spectator took exactly the same position. You know, a few $1 million fine to a multinational corporation like U.S. Steel is nothing really more than just a licensing fee to do business.
And the country keeps the fine.
And so the thought that somehow steel workers are going to take comfort, those that are already thrown out of work and those that may be forced out of work are going to feel comfortable because the Minister of Industry is taking the company to court for a few $1 million fine, when that probably covers a couple of weeks of operation costs at a plant that size, certainly their whole organization. And you know what? That's not what we want. What we really want at the end of the day is a government that deals with this at the front end. I mean, once we're at the back end dealing with penalties and punishment, we've already lost. What we need are deals up front, and deals that make sense for Canadians. The government speaker tries to say that we don't support any foreign takeovers. I know for a fact my colleague was on his feet just a while ago reading a list of them. No, there isn't a great big long list, because quite frankly, most of them aren't very good for the people of Canada, and we just wish the conservative government would act in the same vein.
There's enough time for very brief